26. Water hazards, and also including lateral water hazards. First things first, it is a question of fact whether a ball that has not been found after having been struck towards a water hazard is in the hazard. In order to apply this rule, it must be known or virtually certain. And that's something that was changed a few years ago, the verbiage as far as whether a golf ball is in a water hazard or not. The best way I can explain known or virtually certain is if you hit your golf ball towards a water hazard, this is the 8th hole event page, there has to be no other spot on the golf course where the golf ball could be. Okay, that's how I kind of think of known or virtually certain that the ball is in the hazard. There's no other place it could be. It's in this pond right here fronting the green. And some decisions, 25-1, 26-1, and 27-1 talk about this idea of known or virtually certain. In the absence of such knowledge or certainty, the player must proceed under Rule 27-1, which is ball lost or out of bounds, the provisional ball rule. Okay? So if there's any question as to whether or not your golf ball is in a hazard, okay, you have to play under 27-1. You can't just assume it's in a hazard. And that happens a lot of times when you're playing a golf course, let's say you're not familiar with, all right? And let's say it's kind of a blind hole or a dog leg, and there's a water hazard, at the bottom of a hill, but there's a whole bunch of trees around, all right? Again, if you don't know, you have to play under 27-1, okay? Unless there's a spot around the golf course that spots your ball and it goes into the water hazard, okay? Or one of the other players in your group saw it go into the water hazard. In that situation, if you don't have virtual certainty, you have to play from that where you last played your shot from. Okay, now let's talk about the options that a player has when he or she hits it into a water hazard. And before we go any further, water hazards are defined by yellow lines or yellow stakes. Lateral water hazards are defined by red lines or red stakes. I'm sure you've all seen them on the golf course. Maybe some of you have wondered, why are they different colors? Well, they're different colors because you have different options with each of them. Okay? So, we're talking about a regular water hazard here, a yellow hazard. The first option is you can always play the ball as it lies. Okay? If it's let's say a creek, that is dried out and you can go down and play it, you are allowed to. All right? There's no penalty in fact, in that situation. You can go ahead and play it. The second option, under the penalty of 1 stroke, is play a ball under the stroke and distance penalty, i.e. just drop another golf ball or tee up another golf ball from where you last played the shot. The third one is to drop a ball behind the hazard, keeping the point at which the original ball last crossed the margin of the hazard between the hole and the spot on which the ball is to be dropped. So in this situation here, player's ball hits it onto the green. Let's say it spins back down off the green and it enters the hazard right there. Most people would think, oh, I've got to drop it right here. Okay, well that's not the case. You have to take the spot where it last crossed the margin of the hazard and go back on the other side of the hazard and drop your golf ball under the penalty of 1 stroke. It's not on this line, it's where it last crossed the margin of the hazard. Okay? Now, the play under the penalty of 1 stroke, now this is where we're going to talk about lateral water hazards. As an additional option available, only if the ball last crossed the margin of a lateral water hazard, i.e. a red hazard. Drop a ball outside the water hazard within 2 club lengths of and not near the hole. Okay, so you can see this spot right here. That's where it last crossed the margin of the hazard. You can drop the ball within 2 club lengths. And then the second option is a point on the opposite margin of the hazard, equidistant from the hole. So what this is showing you here is that it crossed here, and it was 38 yards from the flagstick. Let's say there were some trees in front of you there. You don't want to drop behind there. Well, let's say, as an additional option, you can go to the other side of that hazard, and there's no trees in front of you there. And you've got a clear shot to the green. This option is, probably the option that's used the least, but in a lot of situations, it's the best option to use. I saw a player a few years ago qualify for the sectionals of the U.S. Open qualifier because he knew this rule. If he had dropped his golf ball here, he was on a severe side slope with trees in front of him. So what he knew was he could go to the other side of the hazard, find out the equidistant spot, and drop it on the other side. And he had a clear shot to the green. He hit his next shot onto the green to this far and made it, and he qualified for the sectional of the U.S. Open. So it's important to know that part of the lateral water hazard drop situation, because it comes in handy sometimes. So again, here are all the 5 options of a lateral water hazard. All right. The number 1 option is to play the ball as it lies. That's the same option you have with a regular water hazard. You can also play the ball under the stroke and distance penalty, same as with a yellow water hazard or a regular water hazard. Drop behind the hazard, keeping the point where the ball last crossed the hazard margin between the hole and the spot where the ball is dropped. Again, very similar to the yellow. And then we have the final 2 that are different from a regular water hazard. Drop within 2 club lengths of the point where the ball last crossed the hazard margin. Or drop within 2 club lengths of the point on the opposite margin, equidistant from the hole. Okay? The way I always look at water hazards, as somebody who sets up golf courses and runs events, lateral water hazards generally, for the most part, run down the sides of holes. Okay? Whereas yellow water hazards are generally hazards that you have to get over in order to, reach your next shot or reach the green. Okay? It's an integral part of playing a golf hole to carry a water hazard, and that's why they're marked as yellow, and that's why you have less options with them. Think of the 17th hole at the TPC of Sawgrass. It's an island green. That's marked as a regular water hazard because the most important part of playing that hole is to hit it onto the green. If it was marked as a red hazard, a lot of times people would be able to drop their golf ball up on the island when they really didn't execute the shot properly. Okay? So it's important to understand why hazards are marked certain ways. It makes it a little easier to understand how to use the options.
A real good point about number 3, dropping the ball behind the hazard, is if you keep that point between you and the hole, there may be an advantage. You can go back on that line.
You can go as far as you want. As far as you want. You can find your most comfortable distance. Okay?
Fairway.
Yeah, exactly. And I see this a lot of times on tour when they do, hit bad golf shots and hit it into a water hazard. They don't drop it right where they were. They'll go up and they'll find whatever yardage suits them the best. Let's say they're deadly from 100 yards with their sand wedge, and let's say they hit it into a water hazard. They'll go right to 100 yards and drop it there because that's what gives them the best opportunity to execute the next shot.
On number 3, if there's a drop zone, can you not play from the drop zone and go?
Yeah, drop zones, that's a good question. Drop zones are always considered additional options, okay? And in situations where drop zones are available, as an additional option, you can always use a drop zone. Most times, drop zones are used for regular water hazards, or yellow water hazards, because in situations where, again, you have a pond or a creek that fronts a green and you're teeing off from, let's say, 200 yards and you're not able to get over that pond or that creek, a lot of times a drop zone will be put in just in front of that creek so that you might only have to hit it 50 or 60 yards. But, on a local rule sheet, if a drop zone is being used at an event, it will say that it is used as an additional option in that situation. And a lot of times, drop zones, they're not always maintained as well as the rest of the golf course. I've dropped it into a divot many times in a drop zone. And that's just adding insult to injury.
One thing I was going to point out is when you look at your rule sheet before you tee off that day of your tournament, and you get to that section, look for the word either may or must.
Right.
If it says drop zone may be used on hole number 12, then you know it's the option.
Mhm.
If it ever says must, then you know you have no.
Right, exactly. Yep.